guys, welcome to That's Cakeable. I'm Janine. This week I'm going to show you how I made my Easter bunny on a donut cake. So I've got a little bit of a sneaking suspicion that Mr. E Bunny is going to have a hard time at Easter this year. The state the world's in, social isolation, all that sort of stuff, how he's going to manage to deliver all those eggs is beyond me. I'm sure he's got it figured out though, but no doubt once he's done, he's going to look a lot like this guy. And deservedly so. Okay guys, time waits for no man, let's get on with it. Okie dokie, let's get this show on the road. To make the donut, I'm using a 6-inch round chocolate mud cake that I've split into two 1-inch layers. Our donut needs a hole in the middle, of course, so I'm taking a circle cutter and I'm going to cut a hole straight through the center of both of these layers. To do that, I'm just going to take the first layer and cut the first hole through that layer. Then I'm going to pop that layer on top of the other layer so that I can line up the center and make sure that I get the holes in the right spot. Once that's done, I'm just going to fill it with a layer of chocolate ganache. Now that the cake's ready, it's time to start carving out our donut shape. So I'm just going to take a small serrated knife and start carving out a general donut shape. I'm going to lay the serrated knife at an angle from the center hole that we've made and start rounding out that edge. Once that side is done, I'm going to do that on the outside also. And because this is quite a small cake, I'm then going to flip it over and just round out the bottom a little bit also. Not quite as much as the top. Once you're happy with your donut shape, then go ahead and give it a crumb coat with some chocolate ganache or buttercream, whichever you're using. Alright, so the donut cake has now had a rough ganache coat and I've set that into the freezer for about 5 minutes just to set up. Once it's set up, I'm going to bring it back and give it a final ganache coat. I find the best way to get those nice curves around the edge, because it is quite rounded, is to use an acetate smoother when you're smoothing out the ganache. With the center hole of the donut cake, just do the best you can, but if you're having a little bit of trouble, just pop a glove on your hand and use your finger inside that donut hole to smooth it out. Once it's all ganached, I'm just going to pop it aside to chill again for a moment before I bring it back and cover it in fondant. So to cover the cake, what I've done is rolled out some ivory coloured fondant, big enough that it covers the cake plus has enough room to slip some underneath. It is rounded, so you've got to remember that part. I spritz the now ganached donut cake with some water and then lay that fondant over the top. Start smoothing around as I go, and for the center hole I just make a little cross with a sharp knife and just push that fondant inside the hole. And don't worry about the inside of the hole being perfect, you're not going to see this part. If you were to make a donut cake and just make it a standalone donut cake, what I would do is, prior to putting the ivory fondant over the top of the donut, I'd cut out a strip of ivory fondant and line the inside of that hole first. That way it'd be nice and neat once you were done. I went around and I cut off that excess fondant, leaving a little bit of an edge, and then with a sharp knife I just very gently tucked it underneath the cake. I went ahead and smoothed out that fondant with the combination of my hands and acetate smoother, and another great tip is using another piece of fondant to smooth out your fondant. Fondant to smooth out the fondant. Fondant to smooth out the fondant. Okay, the donut is all covered in our ivory fondant, but this donut's looking a little bit pale. It needs some cooking. So to achieve that nice, rich, deep fried colour, I decided to hit it with the airbrush. Using just a light stream, I used some ivory food colouring right around the top, but leaving a band on the side. If you have a look at real donuts, when they're cooked, they're flipped, and generally that centre part doesn't get quite as well cooked, so it's a lot paler. I went ahead and did a light spray of the ivory on the bottom edge of the donut also, remembering to leave that centre band. It still wasn't quite cooked enough looking for my liking, so I added a little bit of brown to my airbrush and spritzed the top with some brown, very, very gently. and did the same on that bottom edge, once again avoiding that center line. Okay, time to glaze the donut. Of course, I'm not really using glaze, I'm using fondant in this instance. So while our donut is sitting aside and that airbrush color is drying, let's make the pink glaze. Okay, so of course, firstly I have to roll out some pink fondant, which is what I did. You don't want this to be too thick. And then I took an 8-inch round cake board and placed that on top of the fondant. Now I've done this because I know that my cake is a 6-inch, and with an 8-inch I know that I'll have enough fondant to cover the inside and the outside drips of the cake. Using that as a template, I cut around that 8-inch cake board, and then I took my X-Acto blade and just made a wavy freehand edge around that circle. Now I didn't add any water or anything to the top of my donut before I added the pink fondant because I wanted to make sure that it was placed correctly. So what I've done is taken my pink fondant and laid it over the top of my donut, making sure I like where it's sitting. I've smoothed that on a little and once again cut a little cross in the center of that fondant and pushed it into the hole. Now, as I said, if you wanted to make this a standalone donut, you might want to add some pink fondant on the inside of that circle first and then place the frosting on the top. I then took some water on a brush and went around and just adhered that fondant to the top of the donut, gently smoothing it down as I went. And that's it, the frosting's done. Once again though, there was something not quite right. Our glaze was looking a bit dull. Glaze is supposed to be shiny, right? So what I did was coated the entire pink area in piping gel. Now it's looking like glaze. And of course, what's a strawberry iced donut without sprinkles? I did contemplate making my own sprinkles for this cake as it's larger than an average donut. However, it wasn't so large that I wasn't going to get away with using regular sprinkles. So that's what I did. I got regular sprinkles and just sprinkled that over the glaze. Because the piping gel was there, it stuck beautifully. Now the donut is completed, it's time to pop it aside for later on and move on to the next step. Right, says Fred, let's make this pooped bunny. To make the exhausted Easter bunny, I'm actually going to use rice cereal treats as the inside of his body. Now the great thing about this entire cake is that you can pretty much find the recipes for everything I've used over on my website at that'scakeable.com. You'll find recipes for the cake, the ganache, the modeling chocolate and the Rice Krispie treats there. So the first thing I did was made my Rice Krispie treats and added a little bit of melted white chocolate to make it that extra bit firm. I sculpted it into almost like a peanut shape, but one end was a bit longer and one end was a bit rounder. The rounder end, of course, is the head, the longer end is the body. Once I'd sculpted it all, I popped it in the freezer for a while to set up. Then I went to sculpt it and I wasn't happy. When I went to sculpt it, I found that it was a bit of an awkward shape. So I took the drastic measure of cutting off his head. Off with his head! It just made the whole process a heck of a lot easier, and because I'm using modeling chocolate, I'll be able to blend the seams between the body and the head later on, so you won't even be able to tell. Silly me, should have thought of that in the beginning. Let's make this head. Firstly, I covered that rice cereal treat ball in modeling chocolate. Then I took a thick piece of modeling chocolate and rolled it into sort of a rough teardrop shape and popped it straight down the center of that face. To make the little jowl area, just 2 balls of modeling chocolate pressed onto the sides. And then to make the cheeks, 2 large pieces of modeling chocolate wrapped into teardrop shapes on either side. Very rough right now, but just getting the shape. Cutting some excess off to make sure that both sides were even and squishing it all down. Then I take my modeling tool and start defining those areas. So firstly down with the cheeks and then under that teardrop area in the center to make the nose. Using my fingers also to shape that area makes it a bit softer, and blending it all in. Then I took my modeling tool and scribed just under the nose down the center of the chin area to make the little mouth. My modeling tool out once again and rounded off those cheeks, and then using my fingers to smooth it out all over. can see we're already getting our bunny shape. Now to make his eyes, I took my bowl tool and just made little crevices where I wanted those eyes to go. Rolled out some more modelling chocolate and popped them into those holes. Then with my sugar shaper, I just scribed a line in for his sleepy little eyes, on both sides of course. Another piece of modelling chocolate over the top of his eyes for his, well, it's more of a brow because his eyes are closed, his eyelids are already there. Then just defining that mouth area with my sugar shaper once again, and then pushing it in to make an open mouth. He's snoring. Remember to use your fingers to smooth this out too. A little dot of modelling chocolate on the end of his nose there, or to make the nose, and I sort of pointed it at the bottom to make it a bit of a triangle, and blended that in with my sugar shaper also. This is why modelling chocolate is a beautiful thing. Last but not least, I took my sugar shaper tool and just ran it over his head to make some fur texture, making sure that I went in line with the face, like the direction that the face was going in. And there it is. That's his head. Okay, so now let's go ahead and work on the body, which is a heck of a lot more simple than the head. So just like the head, the first thing I did was cover the entire body in modelling chocolate. Then I compared it against the head and realized it was still a little small, so I just added a few more layers until I was happy with the width and the length. Once that was done, I took my modelling tool and I textured the whole body just as I had done with the head. For the legs, I took a log of modelling chocolate and I rolled that out, leaving a thicker end and a ball at the other end. And then right in the centre, I pinched that inwards also. The arms are pretty much the same as the legs without the little crook part in the center. So I just rolled out a piece of modelling chocolate, left a thick ball at one end, thinned it out and made a small ball at the other end for the hand. When I flattened all that out, I had my arm. Now they don't look so pretty right now, but once they go onto the body and they're textured, you won't even notice. I attach the arms and the legs to the body in exactly the same way. I just push them up against the body where I want them. And then I take my modelling tool and I blend them into the sides of the body. The chocolate and the chocolate blend together, which makes a great seal. I then go ahead and texture the arms and the legs with that same modelling tool. Attaching the head was exactly the same and it was as easy as I had thought it would be. I just pushed it up against the body where I wanted it and I popped the arms underneath, sort of manipulated the arms where I wanted them underneath the head, one wrapping around the head, one sort of underneath the head. And then I took my modelling tool and I blended the chocolate from the back of the head into the body. There are a few little gaps in there that I just filled in with some extra modelling chocolate and blended that in also. Finally, to make the ears, I just went ahead and rolled out a piece of modelling chocolate into a long teardrop shape. I used a modelling tool and my finger to make the area inside the ear, and then I placed them on top of the head, once again blending the chocolate with the chocolate. I then manipulate the ears and put them into the position I want them to be in. And once that's done, I take my modelling tool and I give those ears texture also, in and out. Now it's time to give our bunny a little bit of colour. I'm going to be using dusts to do this, so technically he's going to become a dust bunny. Once I give my bunny a little dust, it was time to lay him on his donut bed. So because the bottom of my bunny is mainly solid Rice Krispie treats, all I did to support this guy was put a couple of straws inside the donut cake. One where the head will be and one where the end of the body will be. I placed my bunny on top of the donut and just manipulated the legs and the arms a little bit to sit where I wanted them to on the donut. And that was it. My exhausted Easter bunny on a donut was finished. Well guys, thank you so much for joining me again this week. I hope you really enjoyed this week's video. If you did, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so that you're informed every time I upload a new video. I hope you're all staying happy and healthy and well and at home. And while you're at home, why don't you go and get your cake on? I'll see you next time, guys. Bye.